Hello and welcome to part 6, the final part of The Undead Fox of Deadwood Forest by Aubrey Hartman. We left off in an interesting event that was happening. Claire had followed the children to the river, and we were left with an image of a little butterfly girl potentially drowning in the water, and what appears to be Claire biting her braid. Let's see what is happening and how this incredible story will end. Claire leapt from the bushes and let out another shriek, baring every crimson fang. He stood on his hind legs and threw his head skyward, howling like the possessed monster they thought him to be. Deadwood joined the charade. The trees parted, unveiling a shaft of moonlight that ignited Claire's silhouette. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, billowing his cape up around him, like a writhing, living thing. The children's terror tore through the night. They pushed and slipped, scrambled in every direction, but the bearish boy, driven by a surge of fear, charged forward and swung his branch at Claire. Now Claire was not used to defending himself. The afterlife had protected him for 6 years, and he'd grown slow and comfortable in that time. Thus, it was not entirely surprising when he failed to move. Forgot to brace for the impact of a blow that could have taken the head off a smaller animal. The branch connected with Claire's skull, perhaps those same tortured bones that had been crushed beneath the car all those years ago. He skidded across the dirt, head cradled in his paws. The boy charged again, stick raised, and released a guttural cry. The jagged weapon was lifted above Claire's soft, exposed belly, and it seemed to him a cruel irony that he would die in the same way Captain had. The children screamed, half of them shouting for the boy to do it, the other half pleading for him to stop. But a call cut through that silenced them all. "Help!" the angel wailed. "Help! It's Greta!" The boy with the stick turned, weapons stilled in the air. The angel was stretched across the ground at the river's edge, holding on to something that thrashed in the raging current. The red-shoed girl. She clung to the angel's arm, trying to claw her way back to the collapsing shore. Her eyes were wild with fear, tiny nails scratching at the mud. The river surged, releasing a full dolge of water, catching the girl's wings like wind in a kite. One moment she was there, the next she was not. The children forgot Claire and ran, sprinting along the river, screaming and tripping and trying to save their small friend. Here was Claire's chance to escape. He'd done what he'd come to do, and those children would never dare set foot in Deadwood again. But he found himself unmoving, his thoughts spinning around a strangely specific memory. It was the red-shoed girl and her mother, as Claire had seen them yesterday, walking on the road between forests. Claire recalled the warm cup of tea expression on the mother's face as she'd pressed her cheek to the girl's. How as they'd walked away, the small girl's paw had fitted perfectly into her mother's. Now Claire was an usher of wandering souls, a connector of destiny and the destined. If a spirit was in distress, it was his job to help. And while he knew that the red-shoed girl would be fine if she left this life, content in the exquisite afterworld, Claire's third eye saw, with piercing clarity, that the mother's soul would not. So let's pause right here. He's saying that that little girl's mother would be so sad if the red-shoed girl undead or died in the river. Claire sprang toward the river, joining the screaming children, but they were slow, their pudgy human legs no match for the rushing current. Claire wove through the mob, leaping and ducking to avoid collision. At the front of the pack, the bearish boy stretched his stick toward the red-shoed girl. She made a grasp for it, but missed, and the boy stumbled and fell, splayed over the riverbank. Claire leapt over him and continued the shouts and screams of the children falling behind. Normally a fox cannot outrun a raging river. However, you'll recall that Claire was now traveling toward the heart of an open realm, and his speed was amplified by the pull of progress. Claire leapt every few strides, practically flying through the air, his cape flapping behind him heroically. Ahead, the girl's butterfly wings flashed in the water, glimmering, disappearing, like a beacon signaling for help. He was close enough now to see the girl was fighting the current, arms flapping with frenzied determination to keep her head above water. Her glittering wings, however, were pushed and pulled by the rapids, spinning her in circles. Claire raced along her, ignoring the clench of his undead lungs, the crunch of his brittle, undead bones, trying to measure a way to pull her out. She was a small human, but he was an even smaller fox, and if he offered his tail or paw, it was certain he would be dragged into the river and would die with her. The child's fight was dimming, her head threatening to dip beneath the battering rapids. Ahead, a fallen tree spanned the width of the river, creating a natural bridge. It would be Claire's only chance to save her. He charged forward, throwing himself onto the log, a graceless, diving motion just as the girl swept past. He grabbed for her wings with his jaws. He missed, but he felt his teeth close around something. A tail, perhaps, though he could not remember humans having tails. And indeed, dear reader, it was not a tail, but the woven plate sprouting from the little human's head. It was, of all things, a braid. Claire heaved, swinging the girl toward the log. Her outstretched arms found the trunk and wrapped around it, cheek pressed to the sodden wood. Safe in that pocket of disrupted current, the girl rested, coughing and gasping for breath. Claire nudged her with his snout until she pulled herself onto the log. On all fours, she quivered, arms buckled, but Claire persisted, prodding her up, guiding her toward the river's edge. She reached the roots of the fallen tree, lowered herself down, and collapsed to the earth. Curled up on the shore, she lay with her eyes closed. Claire sniffed around her, trying to understand why she refused to move. His snout gazed, her trembling palm. Her skin was ice. Claire unclasped his cloak and laid it over her, tucking it carefully around her. It was warm from his own body, hopefully enough to ease her chill until the other humans arrived. But when he straightened, he came face to face with a moment he'd never before witnessed. A soul beginning its journey out of this world. The girl's spirit shimmered above her, connected to her body by a dozen delicate white tethers, like the whistling roots of a mushroom. A somber quiet fell over the woods, dampening the sound of the rushing river behind them. Claire could not move, could not breathe, awed by the sacred sight. One of the tethers binding the soul to the body snapped, like the stem of a leaf spitting from a tree. "No!" Claire yelped. He regained his senses, rising to his hind legs. "You go back in there!" He fumbled with the soul, trying to stuff it back into the body, but his paws groped the open air, the wispy silhouette unaffected by his futile attempt. Claire looked around helplessly. His good ear perked for sounds of the other children, but they were far behind, left in the seam between peace and progress, which seemed, even in that moment, to be growing farther away. In fact, it was. Claire was moving, his paws skidding over the ground, being dragged toward the tree line. In his race along the river, Claire had ventured deeper into the realm of progress. He had not yet near enough to glimpse the open door, but he was close enough to feel its gravity trying to draw him in. He bounded back toward the red-shoed girl and held an unearthed roots of the fallen log, searching for another way to warm her. His gaze settled on the forest edge where the mossy earth was covered in carpet of brittle leaves, the exact kind he kept in a bucket at home for kindling. Claire worked quickly, gathering the driest leaves and sticks and moss. He found that if he kept moving, it was easier to fend off the gravity of the open realm. Next to the girl, he assembled the kindling just the way he'd done 1,000 times at home. He took his monocle from the chain and struck it against a rock, spraying hungry sparks over the pile of tinder. But unlike at home, the sparks were sucked away by the wind, dissipating as soon as they took flight. Claire hunched farther over the kindling and struck the monocle again and again, looking back and forth from the unlit tinder to the spirit floating above him. It clung feebly to the girl's body as a stiff wind could blow her into the afterlife. It would be only moments now if nothing was done. Claire released an exasperated growl and struck his monocle harder. The thin frame snapped. He gasped, horrified. 1,000 fires this monocle had started, and this would be the last. With its final strike, it had sent a fat spark onto the kindling. Claire flung the broken monocle away and blew on the pulsing ember, praying to the all-knowing universe it wouldn't go out. The spark ignited. Claire fed the hungry flame with twigs and leaves, carefully giving it what it needed to grow, but not a sprig more. It was a well-honed skill, and before long a fire blazed beside the girl. Her bleary eyes fluttered open, perhaps awoken by the light. Claire retreated as to not spook her, clutching the fallen tree. The girl wriggled a hand from beneath Claire's cloak, stretching toward the fire, seeking its warmth, but still she trembled, and even from a distance Claire could see that her skin had gone the color of his tail, a silvery pallor that seemed to mean something very bad. She coughed and closed her eyes. Another tether between her soul and body broke. Claire looked around desperately. What else should be done? Where were the other children? How had he, an undead monster, ended up the only hope for this small girl's life? In his distraction, the ground began to slip away again, progress trying to drag him toward its open heart. Clamping his jaws around the unearthed roots, Claire pulled himself back. Hearing the commotion, the girl wrestled. Though her eyes did not open, she stretched her fingers toward Claire, reaching for him, perhaps seeking the comfort of a nearby soul. Claire hesitated. The girl's spirit wavered in some intangible breeze. It seemed inevitable that the final few tethers would snap. One by one, her spirit would lift away. In that moment, should not have to be alone. Claire crept forward and curled into the hollow of the girl's trembling body, nuzzling his snout into the curve between her chin and throat. His whiskers tickled her neck, and she squirmed a bit, finally settling with her forehead pressed to his. Claire exhaled a weary sigh. How had it only been 3 days since Ginger Snipes had arrived? In that time, Claire had not known a stitch of peace, as though a seam of his very existence were being torn in different directions. At least now, under the weight of this small girl's arms, his entire being was finally in agreement. Here was precisely where he should be. Something wondrous occurred. The girl's quivering stopped. Her body relaxed, her fingers uncurled from their agonized fist, and she muttered the softest, gentlest, most offensive thing ever spoken to Claire. Good doggy. Aghast, Claire shot upright. Smiling weakly, the girl patted him on the head, a clumsy gesture that rattled his undead brain. Of all the indignities! Here Claire had pulled her from a raging river, had sacrificed his beloved cloak and monocle, had built her a fire with his bare hands, a thing he suspected not even the brightest human was capable of, and she was treating him like a pet? Like a dim-witted, subservient dog? All these thoughts went through Claire's mind. Dear reader, because it was his way to puff himself up with outrage in the face of vulnerability. The girl's bleary gaze opened. Her 2 eyes met Claire's one. He braced for the realization to dawn on her that he was not a nice doggy curled up in her arms, but a wild fox, one with a missing eye and shriveled ear and crooked whiskers, and that was to say nothing of the berry blood he'd smeared over himself. But the girl did not look at him with disgust or terror. She peered at him in the same way she'd scrutinized the glass caps, the way she'd examined Deadwood, as if he was interesting. Good boy, she whispered again, then hooked her arm around his neck, nuzzling her cold cheek to his, and closed her eyes. She was apparently smart enough not to call him a dog again, but she had repeated the other word, the same word Ginger Snipes had used to describe Claire. Good. Claire blinked. An idea had long been dancing on the edge of his thoughts, knocking on the door, and on All Hallows' Eve, curled up in the arms of a small, gentle human, he finally let it in. Claire, the undead fox of Deadwood Forest, was a good soul. Perhaps more important, he was a soul worthy of good things. His heart swelled with the realization, nay, the decision, that came next. Good, worthy souls did not belong in the realm of pain. It seemed preposterous that he'd ever believed he belonged there. Imagine it. Claire living among the greedy-hearted Gregs of this world. What would he do? Spend eternity searching for a quiet corner amid the chaos? Plant an afterlife garden, fighting to grow something in a realm of destroyers? Trying to befriend some of those nasty souls? That was the real danger, after all. He befriended a mushroom. He released a sharp, yippy laugh. The girl smiled sleepily, patting his snout. Claire was just about to nuzzle back into the warmth of her neck to draw his fluffy tail tighter around them, when his ear caught the sound of an approach. A muffled voice shouted, "Where's that smoke from?" "Over there!" Far off, human footsteps charged through the forest toward them. "Greta!" came a frantic scream. Claire recognized that voice, for he'd heard it only yesterday. The girl's mother. Her cry tore through the night. "Greta!" Even something in her tone was familiar now, a desperate hope that tickled the edges of Claire's memory. He perked upright to watch her approach, but instead found himself whisked into the bright haze of a recollection. Shrieking brakes, hot rubber, a thud. A truck peeled away, its black exhaust pluming over a gravely injured fox. The recollection skipped forward, moving through flashes of bright images, slowing into real time only when a second car barreled down the road. The car swerved, narrowly missing the dying fox. The passenger door flew open. A woman nearly tumbled out. One hand clasped over her mouth, the other clutching her round belly. "Oh, Stephen, it's still alive!" "What can we do?" the driver asked. "A vet? A wildlife center? Maybe they can save it. We can—" The woman suddenly moaned, doubling over as she clasped her belly. In an instant, the man was at her side, coaxing her back into the car. "We still have an hour's drive to the hospital. There's no time. We have to leave it here." "We don't have a choice, Wendy. This baby is coming." "We can't leave it here. We don't have a choice, Wendy. This baby is coming." The woman released a soft sob. "Wait," she cried, bracing herself on the guardrail. She knelt beside the fox. She peeled off her scarlet sweater and laid it over the mottled fur. "Oh, you precious thing," she whispered, a hushed prayer to the universe. "Don't let him suffer long." Beyond them, Brickbane's blue eyes glittered in the shadows. The recollection collapsed. "Do you think Wendy is this little girl Greta's mom?" I wonder. Claire's undead heart galloped, his mottled fur whipping in the All Hallows Eve winds. That had been him dying on the road. And the woman, it was the mother of the girl. He'd seen her walking along the road yesterday. The filthy sweater pulled from the underbrush had been the one she laid over Claire all those years ago. He'd never remembered that moment of kindness, for he'd been too close to death to understand what was happening. He'd only recalled the feeling of warmth that had settled over him, the relief as his trembling had subsided beneath the sweater. But why had the afterlife shown him this? Recollections were only ever used to understand a soul's destiny, and that recollection had been his. What was he meant to understand? He studied the girl's pale moon cheeks, her fists gripping the hem of his cloak. He laid his cape over her in the same way the mother had laid the sweater over him. It was a kindness returning to the giver, a completion of karma. A circle drawing closed. Claire furrowed his brow, feeling as though he was finally about to understand the meaning of it all, because there most certainly was, in all things, and most especially in the things revealed by the afterlife, meaning. "We can't leave it here. We don't have a choice, Wendy. This baby is coming." The girl had been the one in the mother's belly that night. She'd been moments from being born, even as Claire lay dying. 6 years ago, the girl had arrived in mortality as Claire had leapt. Tonight, one of them clung to life, as the other prepared to let go. A rush of wind swept through the trees, the sound like a mother shushing a child. "Greta!" The humans were close now. So close, the ground shook with the rumble of their footfalls. Claire peeled himself from the girl. Her eyes didn't open, but her limbs no longer shook. The color had returned to her cheeks, and her shimmering spirit had melted back into her body, no longer threatening to leave. Claire drew his cloak from her, clasped it around his neck, and crept into the shadows. Holding to the trunk of a tree, he stole one last look at the small human whose destiny had been strangely intertwined with his own. Above them, the colliding realms rippled like a gauzy veil over the stars. Soon, midnight would strike. The realms would surge, one final rush of power as the 4 doors slammed shut. Every year it woke Claire from sleep, a jolt of energy that tore through the forest and left him briefly gasping for air. After that moment, Deadwood was safe for another year. No gaping doors, no risk of a soul being drawn into a realm outside their fate. The realization came like a shooting star. The afterlife was urging Claire out of Deadwood on All Hallows Eve for a reason. It was not abandoning him, it was trying to save him. The human search party arrived, followed by the beacon of Claire's fire smoke. They fell over the little girl, sobbing with relief. There were murmurs of wonder, marveling at who had pulled her from the river. Who could have built this fire? What creature had left these tiny prints in the mud? "An angel in Deadwood," came the girl's frail reply. But Claire heard none of it, for a decision had been made. A new plan formed. He was gone. He was already gone. Where is Claire going? Interesting image here. Oh, we have mushroom tops hanging, so it looks like he's back at home. He looks very angry, and it looks like he's talking to a possum. What do you think he's mad about? Chapter 26. "Ginger snipes!" Claire burst into the cottage, flinching as he did. It was precisely the third time he'd erupted through the door, and the third time he was certain that Ginger Snipes would shriek and spill something and demand he quit doing that. Claire braced himself on the dining table, his knobby knees trembling. The adrenaline from saving Red Shoe Girl was wearing off, and he'd spent a great deal of energy battling the pull of the afterlife to make it back to the cottage. But he could not leave without saying goodbye, without telling Ginger Snipes the truth about her destiny, and perhaps most exciting of all, the truth about his. For tonight, Claire was going to die. Now he understood the reason the afterlife had dropped Ginger Snipes in Deadwood so abruptly on the week of All Hallows Eve. It was giving Claire a chance to change his fate. For on this night, and this night alone, he could enter any realm of his choice. The question Claire had to ask so many wandering souls, he now turned on himself. Peace, pleasure, or progress? In which eternal realm could he see himself happiest? His mind reeled with each wonderful possibility. Claire loved the chase of progress, that much he knew, ushering souls, tending to his garden, tidying his cottage. On the other hand, he did cherish his visits from souls belonging to pleasure, and could imagine himself quite happy in their company for eternity. And there was the way he relished the peace of being tucked beneath his quilt, reading his human books, the perfect quiet of Deadwood all around. In fact, it was exactly that, the perfect quiet of his cottage, that pulled him out of these thoughts. Where was Ginger Snipes? He had not met with her shrieking, spilling greeting. He had not met with anything at all. Claire scoured the room for the badger, but with the candles and hearth fire still stuffed, his eyes struggled to distinguish shape from shadow. Perhaps she was playing a game, though this hardly seemed the time for it. Ginger Snipes, where are you? Again, no response. Claire's single undead ear might have missed the soft clink of jars on the shelf above the hearth. His single undead eye most certainly would have overlooked the flash of white fur. But, as we have established, his snout was as keen as ever, and it did not miss the familiar scent of sweet, rotting trash that wafted toward him. Claire snatched up a bottle of dried blushers, revealing a rat cowering on the shelf behind it. 9? Claire exclaimed. The rat sprang to his hind legs, clearly as surprised to be caught as Claire was to catch him. Fox, you're back! Excellent! Just the guy! As 9's eyes rose to Claire's face, he shrieked and fell backward, releasing his grip on the bulging satchel. What happened to you? Claire reached up to inspect the source of 9's horror and found the sticky pulp he'd smashed over himself earlier. Oh, it's just berries. He grabbed a rag and scrubbed the mess from his face. 9 still looked aghast. And where did your monocle go? Claire flung the rag to the bucket beside the hearth. 9, what are you doing in my home? And what is that satchel you've got there? Oh, this? This is nothing. Nothing much, I mean. Just a small thing. A small token of your appreciation. Claire squinted his good eye. The fox and the rat stared at each other. Claire trying to understand what was going on. 9 trying to gauge how much Claire was understanding. It didn't take long to make sense of it. The rat was stealing Claire's mushrooms. 9 shuffled sideways to shield the stolen goods. I just figured since I had to do your job, you owed me back. My job? Yes, and one more thing. I noticed your mushroom garden out there. Does it always look smashed up like that, or... 9, Claire growled. 9 lifted his tiny pink palms as if to say, What? What do you mean you did my job? Claire looked around. And where's Ginger Snipes? I told you, she's gone, replied 9. No, you didn't. You didn't say that. Where is she? I don't know where she is, but she sure isn't here anymore. I got rid of her. Ding dong done, Fox, 9 said, then mumbled, and to be honest, it was much easier than you were making it out to be. The sound of rushing blood filled Claire's good ear. He searched the rat's face for some clue as to what transpired. Got rid of her? How? 9, at this point, was quite irritated with the half-dead fox, who seemed not only to have failed to follow their clearly mapped-out plan, but to have forgotten it altogether. What do you mean, how did I get rid of her? It was your plan. But I wasn't going to. I never really wanted to. 9 looked up at Claire with contemptuous pity. Oh, Fox, he sighed. You just don't have the killer instinct. Not like I do. Suspected it all along. Then the moment you brought your whimpering face to the dump tonight, I knew what I had to do. Come into your spooky little wood and make sure you didn't mess this up for us. 9 slung an arm around his satchel, which was as tall as him and twice his fat. These mushrooms depend on you, Claire, and I depend on these mushrooms. Couldn't have you disappearing on me just because you felt bad for the badger. Lucky for us, you weren't even home to get in the way. So you... I sent her running into the woods, straight into those invisible death doors you told me about. Claire staggered back, whiplashed by this new revelation. Ginger Snipes was gone, swallowed up by some afterlife realm where she'd live for eternity. It was the very thing he plotted to accomplish, what he thought he'd wanted all along. So then why were the sour contents of his stomach inching up his throat? Claire collapsed into the largest seat at the table, looking around at the cottage. He hadn't even had the chance to say goodbye. And now what? It was over. Claire was to remain usher of Deadwood, after all. Was it just him, or had the walls tightened? Was the ceiling lower? Had it always been this small? His display of beloved human books looked as haggard as Claire felt, and more decorative than anything, for he had long ago memorized their every word. Even the garlands of fungi and shelves of jeweled bottles felt like the work of a past life. When exactly had he warmed to the thought of leaving it all? Hadn't he needed to stay here with every cell of his mind, body, and soul? Well, perhaps not body. His joints had ached for rest since Ginger Snipes had knocked on his door. His soul, too, had been dragging a bit weary and short-tempered. Apparently only his mind had been wanting to stay. And now even that part of him finally caught up, embracing the truth. Claire needed to move on. It was possible even that he was ready for it. For Deadwood was a forest of perpetual autumn, but Claire was a sort of living thing. He could not thrive in a single season forever. What about you? Do you think you could live in a forest where it looks like autumn year-round? I think fall and autumn have a very beautiful, color-changing kind of sense to it, but it is kind of sad and gloomy when all the leaves are gone and winter comes around. Now, don't get me wrong. Living in Illinois, I feel like we get all 4 seasons and can enjoy cold times and then hot times in the summer. But it is nice to see the seasons changing. Would you be able to thrive or survive in a single season forever? Imagine living in Florida where it's warm year-round and you don't get to have cold or snow. Or imagine living in Alaska or Canada where it's colder more frequently and you could be in a place where it's only snowy and the sun doesn't come out much. Could you thrive in a single season? His soul needed change to grow. Claire shot out of his seat, startling the rat, who'd been busy shoving more fungi into his haversack. 9! Which way did Ginger Snipes go? Hurry! Why? What are you going to do? Go after her? The rat peered at Claire, then shrugged, waving a paw. This way, that way. I was too busy collecting my payment to notice. What did you say to get her to leave? I told her you were in trouble and needed her help. And she didn't ask where I was? 9 glanced sidelong at Claire as he cinched up his bag. Nope. I could barely even finish my sentence before she was running out the door. He gave a short whistle. Ran straight out. Think about the character traits of Ginger Snipes. He told her that Claire was in trouble and needed her help, and she just ran straight out. Talk about a good, dedicated friend to just do that, risk her own life to save a friend. She didn't say anything, not a thing. And in that moment, Claire knew 9 was lying. Uh-oh. What do you think he's lying about? For Ginger Snipes, in all the hours he had known her, had never gone a minute without saying, shouting, or asking something. Claire grabbed 9, lifting him to peer straight into his beady eyes. Why are you lying? The rat squealed, trying to wriggle his way out of Claire's paws. I'm not! Claire tightened his fist around the rat's belly, not enough to hurt him, but enough to make him think twice about lying again. I know you want to keep me around so you can keep selling my mushrooms, but you listen to me, you selfish rodent. This is a matter of life and death. 9 let out a choking squeal and threw up his paws. All right, Claire loosened his grip, only enough to let the rat talk. All right, Fox, lay off. Yeesh. You should be grateful. Here I am, sticking my neck out to save your job, and you tell me. Fine. I sent her that way. The rat hitched his head back toward the dump. But it was a long while ago, Fox. You'll never catch her. The world fell into slow motion as Claire's gaze lifted, his undead heart gripping with horror. For 9 had sent Ginger Snipes straight into the heart of pain. Uh-oh. It's getting intense again. We're almost done. If she's heading in that direction, and based on Claire's exhaustion from saving the little girl and running back, and now having to go chase Ginger Snipes, do you think he'll have enough energy to find her? Do you think Ginger Snipes will try to sniff him out and realize he's not in the direction of pain? Do you think she's getting currently sucked up into the realm of pain? What do you think is happening? Or what do you think is going to happen next? Chapter 27. Claire raced over the uneven ground, hurtling through the south woods, where the world blazed with crimson light. "Ginger Snipes!" he cried, his voice carried off by the howling wind. He paused every few strides, clinging to brambles and roots, struggling against the pull of pain as he strained to listen for her reply. This realm's power was far different than the steady gravity of peace or progress. It was a pulsing, heavy force, as if it were deliberately trying to throw off Claire's balance and claim his soul. "Ginger Snipes!" Sirens wailed in the distance, coming from the place where Claire had left the red-shoed girl. What do you think those sirens are? Potentially an ambulance? The branches of every tree cracked and moaned, straining against pain's rage. But through it all, Claire swore he heard the desperate call of his friend. Claire skidded to a stop, good ear straining. Indeed, Ginger Snipes' cries threaded the chaos, but her voice was strangely muffled, somehow both distant and close, as if it were coming from all around and nowhere at all. Claire bounded forward, screaming her name. He wrapped his arms around the trunk of a firmly rooted tree, the wind rushing so fiercely it threatened to pull the whiskers from his face. "Ginger Snipes! Where are you?" This time, her voice came from directly above. "Look up!" And there she was. A black and white, squashed skunk figure hugged the branches above, huddled in the safety of the tree, whose boughs were bending into a leafy cage around her. A happy sob escaped Claire. "You're here!" he wailed. "I'll tell you one thing, Claire," Ginger Snipes shouted. "A little trash rat is going to pay for this. That little trash rat is going to pay for this." Claire scaled the tree to meet her, carefully stretching from bough to bough, then ducking into the leafy cage where she was riding out the storm. Inside, the howling winds quieted to a dull roar, and though the leaves and limbs shook, Claire knew they would hold. The trees of Deadwood had long withstood the temperamental afterlife on All Hallows Eve. Claire huffed and heaved, breathless but grinning. "I thought I'd lost you!" Across from him, Ginger Snipes balanced on a thick bough, clutching the branch above her head. "You almost did! Why did the trash rat send me over here? Were you really in trouble?" "It's a long story," Claire considered how to explain. It would be easy to gloss over the truth, to let Ginger Snipes go on believing he was innocent in all this mayhem. But an untold truth was a heavy thing, and Claire did not want to carry that weight for eternity. "It's my fault," Claire said, practically yelling over the howling wind. "What is?" "All of this. Remember when I said I wanted to get rid of you because I was scared? That was true, but it wasn't the full truth." Have you ever told the truth, but kept something out because you were scared or sad or just didn't want to fully tell the truth? It kind of still makes you feel like you're lying if you only tell partial truth. But once you release it and say it, it makes you feel so much better that the truth is out there. Ginger Snipes eyed him warily, but said nothing. "You've been unable to move on to the afterlife for a reason, a very specific reason. In fact, it is the same reason I was kept here 6 years ago." He watched Ginger Snipes for some indication that she understood, but apparently he needed to say it outright. "You are the new usher of Deadwood." Ginger Snipes' expression remained blank. The shock of the statement was too much, it seemed. Claire continued in slow, careful terms. "You will live here. You will direct the souls of Deadwood to their eternal fate. The job I have been doing is your calling now." Ginger Snipes and Claire stared at each other. The throbbing light of pain reflected in their beady eyes and turned the whites of their fur crimson. At last, Ginger Snipes gave a gentle, if piteous smile. "Oh, Claire, that is a very interesting offer, but—" She gave a slight but self-assured shrug. "No, thank you." Claire lurched back. "Interesting offer? No, thank you. Ginger Snipes, but why?" Because it would be hard, and I would be terrible at it, so I'll just be off. Ginger Snipes seemed so sure in this decision that Claire nearly accepted it. And indeed, he knew she could make that choice if she wanted, for Claire had been offered the same choice by Brickbane. But one thing he'd learned in these last 3 days and the 6 years before that was the Afterlife's judgments were overwhelmingly right. Claire scrambled forward, stopping with his nose a whisker from Ginger Snipes. Around them, the canopy shook with growing intensity. You would not be terrible at it, Ginger Snipes. She looked incredulous. She cried above the howling wind. I just sent that wolf into some unknown realm. Claire cried back. And you did it with confidence. What does confidence have to do with it? Everything, quite frankly. The badger grimaced as if some deep, unwelcome part of her was considering this new fate. She shook her head vigorously. No! No! I've never been in charge of anything, Claire. And I know nothing about ushering. You've gathered more information about ushering in the past 2 days than I did in my entire 2 weeks with Brickbane. And if you need any further guidance, listen carefully. Under the bed, behind the walnut shell with the eyeball in it, there is a very old book, the Tome of Ushers. Study it and... Wait, Ginger Snipes said. Claire looked at her. She looked back. Precious time ticked by. An eyeball under the bed? Ginger Snipes! She yelped. Was I just supposed to ignore that? Focus! The Tome of Ushers is a record, a book of all things ushers before you have learned. Study it and... I don't know how to read. There are no words. Very few anyway. It is mostly drawings, maps, that sort of thing. You'll understand when you see it. That's a very bold assumption, Claire. Remember when you asked why I was always looking at you? It's because you're the smart one. The one with the plans and the answers to the ideas. I'm just what? You know what? All right, fine. You're right. Claire took her by the shoulders, looking firmly into her eyes. You are not particularly smart. Ginger Snipes blinked. You know, for a second I thought you would disagree with me, and that was going to be like a nice, encouraging moment. You're better than smart, Claire said. You're curious. How is that better than smart, Claire? Ooh, I would love to pause right here and have this discussion with my class. He literally told her, you're not smart. He said, you are not particularly smart. That's kind of an insult, isn't it? But he said, you're better than smart, Claire said. You're curious. Has your teacher or parent at home ever said that you're curious? Curiosity can lead you to learning new things. And it's almost better than being smart. If you're smart and you know how to do something in math, that's a good thing. But if you're curious, then that pushes you to want to learn more. Let's say it doesn't have to be I'm curious about how to solve a fraction problem or I'm curious how to add these numbers together, but you could be curious about animals or curious about the world and the land and the earth, and you'll investigate. And to investigate, you have to read. You have to compare multiple resources, whether it's in a book or a computer article or other websites that help you learn more about this information. But because you're curious, you'll want to learn more. And because you learn more, you're way more smarter than smart, if that makes sense. How is that better than smart, Claire? This would be a really good thing to debate. Because curiosity is the parent of understanding. What do smart animals do for anyone? They walk around in love with their own brains. But curious animals, they are in love with everyone and everything else. Claire briefly lost his balance, thrown by a surge of wind, but caught the branch above him. Curiosity is the single most important thing for an usher. Above all else, you must be curious about the wandering souls who come to your door. But there are plenty of curious animals in the forest. Why me? A wind-blown leaf smacked Ginger Snipes in the snout. She grabbed it and tossed it away. I have wondered that myself, Claire thought of the recollection the afterlife had shown him. Ginger Snipes' father calling her useless. Claire realized it had been the answer to the question of where Ginger Snipes belonged after all. She was supposed to stay here, in Deadwood, where she would discover her worth. It was a gift, but one that did not feel like Claire's to share. Someday you may know the answer, but for now, know this. The afterlife chose you, and because of that, it will not let you fail. Ginger Snipes looked up. perhaps searching for this alleged all-knowing afterlife. She tensed as though the weight of every soul in Deadwood had fallen on her shoulders, and indeed it had. Understand, Ginger Snipes, that you don't have to do this. If you really don't want to become usher, you can take your place in the afterlife tonight. Did you like ushering, Claire? Every second, he replied, tears prickling his one good eye. Ginger Snipes gave a single solemn nod, inhaled, exhaled. Then I'll do it. With these words, the glow of all four realms brightened, like jewels pierced with sunlight. A low hum rose from the forest floor, as though every rock and root were vibrating, every bush and bough whispering. Deadwood was greeting its new usher with its ancient, solemn song. Ginger Snipes and Claire exchanged a thrilled glance. As quick as it came, the hum fell away, whisked off by the howling wind of pain. The prism of lights once again deepened into colors so rich they blotted the clouds. The realms would close any moment. It's time for me to go. Claire unclasped his cloak for the last time and hooked it around Ginger Snipes, enveloping her in its velvet folds. She looked down at it, her claws held stiffly in front of her. It's a little damp, isn't it? It's just water. From what? When I saved the child. Is that what you were doing? Saving the humans? Why didn't you mention that? Sounds like a story I need to... No more stalling, Claire said with a knowing smile. Ginger Snipes' eyes welled. Must you leave, Claire? As surely as you must stay. Where are you going? Claire closed his eyes, hoping for the lure of some realm beckoning him, but it was still All Hallows Eve, every door willing to receive his soul. Even so, he found his gaze drawn toward the one particular realm. Ginger Snipes gave a short, satisfied hum. Somehow I knew you'd want to go there, she said, then added quickly, not that I know anything. Claire patted her paw. You'll be fine, Usher Ginger Snipes. She looked at him gratefully, as though she did not yet believe it, but was comforted that he did. Claire said, let's go home. At that, the Badger and the Fox exchanged smiles, for though they would be going in separate directions, almost certain never to meet again, they both felt a spark of warmth at the thought of home. Claire climbed down first, clinging to the trunk with all four legs as he descended. He held to the base of the tree and offered a paw for Ginger Snipes. Stretching for the branch below her, she took a tumble, and her short arms missed the limb. The cloak snagged, yanking her to stop in the lowest bough. Ginger Snipes, Claire yelped. If you rip my cloak on the first night I gave it to you, I will be very... The world erupted in color. Pressure rang in Claire's good ear, the high-pitched whine of a bursting bubble. Then came the wind, the sucking inhale of a closing door. It snatched Claire off his hind legs and swept him into the open air, his claws stretching towards Ginger Snipes, who remained wedged in the tree, wide-eyed and frozen. The force ripped past Claire in a crimson smear, his reeling mind taking a beat too long to reach the horrid realization. The hour had struck midnight. The realms were shutting with one final burst of power. He was being dragged into the realm of pain. Oh no! What do you think could happen next? Don't you think that's kind of funny? It's one of those moments where it's like the end of the movie, and then the character's like, if you rip my blah blah blah, and then it's like, bam, something happens, and then it's the end. He was just starting to complain one final time, and then this happens. Now, they're animals, and there's no clocks. They just kind of rely on the sun for the time of day. But imagine he doesn't know it's about to be midnight on All Hallows Eve, and the doors are about to shut. He might have thought he had more time to get to progress or pleasure or one of the other realms. So now he's being dragged into pain. Do you think Claire deserves to go to pain? He did do some not nice things during this story, but were those outweighing the good things that he did? What do you think? Chapter 28. Claire clawed at the passing trees, scrabbling for something, anything, to break his momentum. But the force of pain was too swift, and even as his paws brushed some bramble or bough, he was swept away before he could catch hold. He slammed into the trunk of a tree, ricocheting off. Another tree broke his momentum, only for a rattling heartbeat before he was whisked back into the open air. He smashed into the base of yet another sprawling oak. Another. Finally, he understood. There was some perverse rhythm to this torture, and just as his body slammed into the next tree, he reached out. His outstretched paw closed around a leafy branch, wrenching him to a stop just before his fist shaved the bow clean. Claire gritted his teeth, clinging to the twig. The howling wind pulled his tail taut, pinned his whiskers flat against his cheeks. Claire released a cry, mustering whatever strength was left in him. He tried to choke up the branch, to move closer to the safety of the sturdy trunk, but he was no match for the power of pain. He could do nothing but hold on, though not for much longer. He closed his one good eye and prayed for the mercy of the afterlife. Claire felt it before he saw it, the release in his chest, as one less realm coursed through his veins. His eye shot open, just as, in the distant forest, the emerald light of progress clapped out. Pleasure followed. The golden glow vanished in a flash. The Cyrilline blue of peace fell away next. Claire released a triumphant yelp. The realms were closing. He'd survived. Any second, in rhythm with the other shutting doors, pain would leave Deadwood, too. But the moment he was waiting for came and went, and still the forest around him blazed red, the sucking wind dragging him away. The realm of pain was refusing to close, hungry for the soul at its doorstep. Claire dared a glance back. Just beyond his silvery tail, Pain's crimson door gaped like an open mouth. At its center, the portal deepened to black, splintered by shocks of red lightning. A deluge of chaotic sound rose from its depths, roaring, barking, yowling, whimpering, and above it all, the sharp hyena laughter of creatures reveling reveling in that agony. Claire had ushered many of these souls. He knew that. In their own twisted way, they were precisely where they wanted to be, doing exactly what they wanted to do. He also knew that he did not belong with them. "Seal the door!" he cried. His voice carried off like a leaf in a hurricane. In all his years of ushering, he'd only ever opened the realms. Still, now he tried to close this one. Afterlife! Shut the door to pain! Alas, he was a servant to the afterlife, not the other way around, and the jaws of the crimson realm hinged wider. The branch began to peel from the trunk. The roaring chaos swelled. Inch by inch, Claire saw his fate solidified. Brickbane's voice rose from the depths of his mind, a shadow of an echo of a memory. "You will be in pain, young fox." Had his destiny been written all those years ago? Had Brickbane somehow known that Claire's stubborn choices would lead him to this very fate? Or was there some other piece of the puzzle Claire was missing? He squeezed his good eye shut, searching his memory, looking, at last, with his third eye. Claire saw himself as a young kid, scared and alone and barely understanding the white fox who'd appeared from the shadows. Young Claire had rested his head on the pavement, fraught with the revelation that he would be alone in the afterlife. "If you do not come with me," Brickbane had warned, "I cannot spare you from this mortal suffering. I'm afraid you will be in pain, young fox." The memory evaporated. Claire's gaze widened. "You will be in pain," Brickbane had said. He had not said the realm of pain. Brickbane had merely been warning Claire that he would have to continue suffering, dying, if he did not come with him. He did not mean that Claire would spend eternity in the realm reserved for the worst souls. It was a clumsy mistake, a misunderstanding, and a revelation that came too late. The branch snapped and Claire was airborne, nothing between him and the door to pain. He was sucked inside, spinning head over tail through the portal of blinding crimson light. With a jolt, the world went still. Dark. For a tick of time, Claire hung there in the warm silence, glowing against the obscurity of a single gauzy star. Where was he? Before he could think another thought, Claire was once again reeling. But this time, he was being whisked back the way he'd come, into the blinding portal, through the crimson door, back into the crisp, brisk night of Deadwood. What are you thinking here? Do you have any questions? He's been sucked towards the realm of pain for quite some time now, and in just this paragraph, it seems like the realm of pain just spit him back out. What do you think happened? Ask a question that's going on in your brain right now. He plummeted toward the ground. Above him, the realm of pain released a final gasp and slammed shut. Claire hit the mossy earth with a thud. He lay on his back, stunned. Above him, the trees creaked against the inky sky. A soft, lazy salutation, as if nothing had just happened. What in the name of the all-knowing universe had just happened? Claire blinked. He'd been sucked into the realm of pain, then he'd been promptly spat back out. And therein lay the truth. Claire had known all along, but had somehow forgotten to remember for himself. Every soul ends up exactly where they belong. Thus, pain had rejected him. Claire clapped his paws over his eyes, laughing with glorious relief. All that worry, all those restless nights thinking he was destined for eternal suffering. And for what? Everything was as it should be. Pausing right here to make connections. Have you ever had restless nights worrying or thinking, not necessarily about eternal suffering, but maybe a friendship problem you might have at school or a family issue that just is stuck on your mind and you're overthinking it? He's been thinking for the last 6 years that he belonged in pain, when in reality he didn't. He pushed upright, brushing coils of dry moss from his fur, never so happy to be home. And indeed he was back in Deadwood, but around him the forest looked changed. The trees were a shade darker than he'd remembered, and much taller. Their trunks stretched like molasses. The ground was carpeted in a milky fog that had not been there moments ago, and above the heavens were peppered with more purple stars than Claire had ever seen. Claire's steps made no sound as he moved through the fog. The looming trees, knowing watchers that they were, offered him no help, scraping and sighing in their secret language. It all felt so strangely unfamiliar that Claire might have wandered for a long while had he not been for the single warm light glowing from somewhere deep in the forest. His cottage. He ran for it, grinning. But as he reached for the knob, he froze, struck with a realization. The door, which had once been his, would not open for him now. He curled his paw into a fist and knocked. The door swung open. "Claire!" Ginger Snipes shrieked, tossing a cup of tea over her shoulder and throwing her arms around him. Claire felt a wash of relief at the sight of another soul and a great wave of happiness that it was this one. "I knew the afterlife would save you." Claire looked beyond Ginger Snipes into the cottage, which was as he'd left it, cozy and inviting as ever. But it no longer looked like home. "You lit the candles? And the fire?" he marveled. Ginger Snipes nodded eagerly. I did do that. When I was a wandering soul, the cottage was the only light in the forest. Seemed wrong to leave it dark for too long." Ginger Snipes was already rising to the task, and the cloak fit her better than Claire had initially thought. 2. The beetroot velvet flattering with her black and white fur. "Will you do me a favor?" Claire asked. "Anything," Ginger Snipes replied. "Call up the realms?" Ginger Snipes' eyes widened as she understood that was her job now, a fact that seemed to fill her with a pride and panic all at once. She inhaled and said, much more loudly than necessary, "Peace, pleasure, pain, and progress. Yes, progress." The forest once again bloomed into a prism of color. Side by side, the fox and badger stared at the exquisite sight. Claire had always felt small in these moments, gazing into the vast and infinite beyond. But now the vast and infinite beyond seemed to embrace him. He saw at last that he was not apart from it. He was a part of it. A bead of water observing the sea all around. "You know where to go?" Ginger Snipes asked. "I know where to go," Claire replied. "All right. I think this really is goodbye forever, Fox," Ginger Snipes said. She pawed at her eyes, which seemed to have sprung a leak. Claire laid a paw on Ginger Snipes' shoulder and gave her a soft pat, which was, in his way, more tender than embrace. He turned back to the forest, inhaling through his narrow snout, poised to walk into his destiny with the dignity of a withdrawing usher. But Claire did not walk. To Ginger Snipes' shock and delight, he bounded on all fours, leaping, frolicking, plunging into the afterlife with the joyful abandon of a kit. His snow sky tail flashed one last time before he vanished into the glowing woods. Ginger Snipes let out a sharp laugh and called after him, "Travel true!" She would not see Claire again. She would not know for certain which realm had met him with an open door. But if you asked Ginger Snipes, she would tell you that when Claire disappeared that night, a heartbeat after she glimpsed the final flash of his tail, she perked her ear toward the glowing beyond and heard a distant, comforting crackle of a soul finally at peace. Oh, I just got goosebumps. What an awesome realm for him to go to. Claire is at peace, and now he can finally rest. That's the end of our story, but now we have Ginger Snipes. 1 year and 4 months later. Look at Ginger Snipes. She's got a cool little headband, similar to the ones that I like wearing, except this one seems a little bit more flashy. And who is she going to visit? It looks like Hester Fowl from earlier in our book. Let's read these next couple of pages and find out what Ginger Snipes is up to now. Nearly the 8 o'clock hour, as the watery winter sun rose high above the creaking canopy of Deadwood, Ginger Snipe was awakened by a knock. A quiet knock. A knock, Ginger Snipes knew, that would not stay long if she did not move quickly. She shut the tome of ushers, which she studied each morning, then dove into action with the precision of a badger who'd done this 100 times before. Quilt thrown to the foot of her bed, headpiece snatched from the nightstand, cloak whisked off the hook. The headpiece had been left by one of the pesky children when they'd come here that fateful All Hallows Eve, fallen from one of their costumes. It was a gilded arch from which a sunburst spiked upward, crowning the space between Ginger Snipe's ears. On each spike she speared a dried-up berry from the shrub near Deadwood River. She'd had to do quite a bit of bending to get it to fit her narrow head, but the result had been well worth the effort, for she would go so far as to say it made her look legitimate. Official, even. The cloak, of course, had been Claire's, and it provided Ginger Snipes with a comfort that went much deeper than fur and flesh. As she clasped the cloak around her shoulders, Ginger Snipes stole a glance at the building infestation outside the cottage window. It hadn't been her doing. She didn't know the slightest thing about growing fungi, but one day, a few months after Claire's departure, she'd noticed a fuzzy white bud sprouting up from the spot where the biggest mushroom had died. Others began peeking from the earth, dotting the soil in gray and pink and blue. They were the children of the mushrooms who'd gone before, and while Ginger Snipes was not the superstitious type, she could not help but think that this new life was some sort of sign from Claire. The knock came again, more frantically this time, the sound of a sharp beak drumming on the door. I'm coming, Ginger Snipes drew an inhale, then threw open the front door, relishing the way the cloak ballooned around her. Welcome, wandering... Oh, her whiskers fell. You're not dead. Not for lack of hoping. The creature before her was a bird, perhaps a pigeon or a filthy dove, and dressed as theatrically as Ginger Snipes herself. The feathers around her eyes smeared with dark berry pulp, a clattering bone collar around her neck. She released a ragged cough, which was curious because Ginger Snipes had not known birds capable of coughing. Oh, sounds like another bird. So Ginger Snipes didn't go to Hester Fowl. Hester Fowl came to Ginger Snipes. And if you recall from earlier in the book, Ginger Snipes never went into that house that was on the pond. She was outside, so she probably never knew what Hester Fowl looked like. Oh, yes. Oh, the bird collected herself and said, Are you going to invite me in? Oh, yes. Sorry, Ginger Snipes said, still quite puzzled. Would you like to come in? There's no time, the bird said sharply. I need your help. That's so funny. Are you going to invite me in? And then said there's no time. So silly. Ginger Snipes studied the creature at her doorstep. While she was certain the tome of ushers said nothing about a heavy decorated pigeon arriving in Deadwood, the bird seemed to know something Ginger Snipes did not. Still, Ginger Snipes had questions. Who are you? What do you do? I'm Hester Fowl, and what I want is not the question. Hester Fowl's beady eyes darkened, a storm rolling over her expression. The kind of green-black skies that sent squirrels and insects fleeing for cover. The question is, what is coming? A chill swept through Ginger Snipes' undead veins. Hester Fowl. She knew this unexpected guest now, for she never forgot a name. It was the visionary grouse from Fernlight Forest. And what exactly is coming? In the face of Hester Fowl's reply, Ginger Snipes would desperately wish she had not asked. She would wish she had never opened the door. At times wish she had never donned the cloak of the Deadwood usher. For I regret to inform you that the story does get worse before it gets better. We have to go to a dark place, a very dark place, indeed. A place where few badgers and only a handful of weasels and absolutely no jackrabbits have ever gone before. But alas, faithful reader, that is a tale for another day. Oh, and looky here. Is this a fox along the tree? I wonder if this is Claire in peace. He's got both eyes now, though, and he's got 2 ears. His hair looks much nicer than it did in the book, in the story. The narrator's note, if you'd like to pause and read. And the acknowledgments. What a beautiful story by Aubrey Hartman. How would you rate this book? What was your favorite parts? There was a lot of incredible vocabulary throughout this book. And guess what? You just finished it. I'm so proud of you for finishing another book. You are amazing, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Keep reading.